you. Recording is in progress. So good evening, everyone. I think I know everyone who is participating this evening when I take a look down the list there. Good evening to you all. Happy New Year to everyone. I think you all know me. I'm Jeff Leeper. I'm the City Councillor for Kitchissippi Ward. And this evening we're here to take a look at a 25-story development for the beer store. Just, you know, sometimes I give a little bit of a heads up on these ones and where my head is at. I'll be looking at the details on this proposal. The basic height and use is contemplated by the secondary plan that is in place today that we passed in, I guess, 2014, if not earlier. So, you know, I'm kind of looking at the details of this one in terms of, you know, the precise configuration of it. I've heard a number of concerns raised about the amount of parking in it, and I'm certainly sympathetic to those discussions. But rather than me taking you through it, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Steph and ask Stephanie to tell us what's next.
Awesome. So just to let everyone know, this is an application that is currently live on DevApps. So if you'd like to go look it up on DevApps, all the supporting documents are there if you'd like to review anything there. Just to let everyone know as well, as you've probably noticed, this presentation will be recorded. We don't anticipate that any attendees will sort of be able to speak and go on video, but if you do choose to sort of speak that way, or if that does come up, just please be aware of that. Feel free to turn off your video if you're not comfortable with that, if that should come up. And in that case too, since it's recorded, we will be posting it on the Kitchissippi Ward YouTube in probably by the end of the week, which is tomorrow. And we'll be updating the blog post site with that YouTube link. So if you know someone who couldn't attend tonight or anything like that, they can refer to the blog post at kitchissippiward.ca for this site, and they'll be able to find it there in no time. Otherwise, the format for tonight will follow the usual one. So we'll begin with a short presentation from the applicants. It'll be about 15-20 minutes. And after that, we'll dive right into the Q&A. So you'll probably notice that there's the little Q&A box on the bottom. The chat is disabled. So we'll ask you that any questions, any concerns you might have, please put them into the Q&A box located if you're using a computer on the bottom of your screen. And we'll be taking those questions and giving them to the applicants and city staff, the lead planner in this case, to answer them and to delegate them to whoever is most appropriate. So with that, I'll pass it over to the applicants if they'd like to introduce themselves and go through their team and get this started.
That's great. Thank you very much, Steph. I will take the lead here on the presentation. I'm just going to share my screen. How does that look for everyone?
Good.
Excellent. All right. Good evening. My name is Tess Gilchrist, and I'm a planner with IBI Group. And I'm here this evening with Reed's Heritage Properties, who are the developers on the project. And that includes the president, Scott Reed, Melissa McGregor, who is the Director of Development and Construction, and Anthony as well, who's joined us from the boardroom at Reed's Heritage Properties. And Reed's Heritage Properties is an established developer and builder in the Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo area with over 40 years experience. They are focused on bringing quality purpose-built rentals to the market and specifically to Ottawa with this new project. And I'm joined also this evening by the project architect, Michael Cogan. I'm not sure if he's joined us yet. I saw Michael in the attendees and I wasn't sure if that was him or not. But Mike, if you are here, just raise your hand and you can join us. And as well as Mike Lelisher, who is the Director of Construction for Reliance Construction of Canada. And I have a number of my IBI colleagues as well. Tim McCormick, who's a landscape architect. Ben Pascolo-Naveau, who is a transportation engineer. And James Battison, civil engineering technologist with us today, this evening. The subject property is located on the south side of Scott Street, mid-block between Holland and Parkdale Avenues, and is approximately 2,500 square meters and has about 31 meters frontage on Scott Street. The property is currently developed with, as Councillor Leeper mentioned, a one-story commercial building operating as the beer store and its associated surface parking and loading facilities. The proposed development of the property would include the demolition of the existing building and the construction of a 25-story mixed-use high-rise apartment building with a tower floor plate area under 750 square meters. A total of 230 dwelling units are proposed, as well as a 222 square meter commercial unit on the ground floor. The building design includes a covered parking area with 13 parking spaces and a drive aisle which provides access from Scott Street to the rear of the property and the adjacent loading facilities on the abutting property at Holland Cross, as well as access to the underground parking ramp. And the covered parking area is buffered to the east by a landscape strip, and there are currently proposed 4 levels of underground parking with 163 spaces below grade, so that's a total of 176 on the site, of which 154 are allocated for residents, and the 22 spaces are provided to meet the minimum visitor parking requirement. The commercial space is located at the front of the building, adjacent to Scott Street, and the residential entrance is adjacent to the commercial unit, but is set back farther from the street. A residential lobby, an elevator lobby are provided on the ground floor together with garbage room, and an exterior staging and loading area is provided adjacent to the garbage room. And auto turn, we've confirmed that a waste management truck can maneuver the drive aisle and loading area adequately. Interior bicycle parking is provided on the ground floor, as well as in a storage room on parking level 1. And there are additional spaces adjacent to the commercial entrance as well, and a total of 122 spaces currently proposed. Floors 3 to 25 include 10 units per floor, combination of 1 and 2 bedroom units, and each unit includes a private balcony. The property benefits from an easement over the adjacent parcel of land at 1560 Scott Street, which provides access to Bullman Street at the south, right where Bullman turns 90 degrees and becomes Hamilton. So the property is also subject to an easement in favor of 1560 Scott Street over the drive aisle for vehicular and pedestrian traffic, as well as a stormwater pipe that's below grade. And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm just indicating here, this is the area of the easement that is in favor of Holland Cross here in the loading area, as well as the ability of the subject property to cross over this area to get to the street. The lands are adjacent to Tunney's pasture and are approximately 200 meters from the LRT station. And additionally, there are many frequent service bus routes and rapid station-to-station express bus routes within 500 meters of the site. Scott Street also features designated bus priority lanes and a separated eastbound bike lane. I think Councillor Leeper gave us a bit of an indication on where we're at in the process, but just to review that, a zoning bylaw amendment is currently on circulation, and we're just expecting comments shortly. The period ended, I think, last week. So it's just a matter of getting those all together. That was filed in November last year. We attended UDRP on January 7th to receive the panel's feedback on the design, and again, are also waiting for their formal comment package. And that brings us to tonight at the Community Open House. Thank you for hosting. We appreciate the opportunity to engage with the community early on in the process. And the timing is actually really quite great, as we're just receiving comments back on the zoning and the UDRP. So once we receive the full comments from circulation, UDRP, and everything that we hear this evening, we'll be reviewing those comments as a team and coordinating a resubmission to the city. And the next step will be to circulate the site plan application as well. So this project requires the zoning amendment and a site plan approval as well. I won't spend too much time on the policy context. We'll just start at a pretty high level here, but of course, always happy to answer any further questions on how the project aligns with the city's policy direction, should anyone have any questions. The subject property is located within the Tunney's Pasture Mixed Use Center in the official plan, and also in a mixed use area as per the Scott Street Community Design Plan and Secondary Plan. And the secondary plan does allow up to 25 stories on the subject property, or envisions that for the redevelopment. And the proposed mixed-use development at a high level is providing an active streetscape with ground floor commercial space that's oriented to a pedestrian promenade and that interface with Scott Street. The desired density is achieved through what's outlined in the OP and Scott Street Secondary Plan. An appropriate massing of density is provided in relation to the surrounding context, and appropriate tower design and architectural considerations have been made with respect also to parking and servicing being well integrated. The proposed development was also evaluated against the design criteria in the CDP and urban design guidelines for high-rise buildings and transit-oriented development. Ultimately, the project is, establishing a highly desirable, intensified mixed-use redevelopment in immediate proximity to an LRT station, and the building is integrated into the surrounding context through massing, setbacks, building height, and appropriate design qualities and character, and would contribute to a continuous building frontage on Scott Street. Again, the active uses at grade, such as the commercial component and residential lobby area, will be located along the street facade, enhancing the relationship to the public realm. The proposed base of the building supports a human-scaled streetscape and quality pedestrian environment through architectural design and the landscape approach, and provision of outdoor amenity space for communal and private areas have been integrated as well. The current zoning of the property is mixed-use center subzone 12, special exception 22, with a maximum floor space index of 3 and height as per schedules S100, also subject to Schedule 99 in the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw 2008-250. The urban exception 22 adds a number of provisions to the property, but of interest, of course, it limits the height, or rather the height schedule limits the height, but the urban exception 22 requires a minimum 6-meter yard setback on all sides, front, sides, and rear. So the proposed amendment, as it's framed now, again, this is the beginning of the project, but it's our starting point, seeks to rezone the property to a site-specific mixed-use center zone with a new urban exception and schedule to permit reduced front, side, and rear setbacks, and an FSI of 5.5, and permit a height of 25 stories, and address some reduced parking lot landscaping provisions. The proposed development aims to introduce residential intensification on an underutilized property adjacent to a major transit corridor with a high level of architectural and landscape design. The goal is to revitalize the existing streetscape by creating an urban space that can be shared by the public, the residents, and patrons of the commercial space. The design and layout of the proposed development was informed by the constraints of the site, which is an irregular narrow lot with a vehicular and pedestrian easement that is running from the northern to southern boundary. And given the location of the easement, a full street wall frontage would have included, a vast expansive garage door. So the approach taken was much more delicate, and the building is supported on columns above the small surface parking space and driveway area, which preserves the existing easement that is running north-south. And the commercial component was pushed forward of the building, a bit more prominent, and residential entry was slightly recessed below the tower to create a landscape court with some delineation between public and private realm. In terms of the landscape design, again, the public realm has been created to reflect the flowing form of the building, and it's an extension of the built form from the interior to exterior spaces, designed to draw pedestrians into the commercial and residential spaces through the curvilinear form, which is reinforced through the paving patterns, surface treatment, and strong concrete borders. Site furnishings will draw on curvilinear forms. Custom wood benches create inviting spaces, which are very unique to this plaza area, defines the space. Plantings are predominantly ornamental grasses, selected to create, a variation in height and create a sense of flow within the public realm. And grasses also allow for four-season interest through form, color, and their seed heads. The planting was designed to be simple, but still promote a highly designed space. The amenity terrace, so this is the ground floor condition where the easement runs north-south and there's an adjacent parking area and access to the underground ramp. But on the second story of the building, which is cantilevered on the second story above that drive aisle, is partially outdoor and partially indoor. And the outdoor area on the second floor there is an extension of the indoor space, creating a series of rooms that integrate into the building and create diverse opportunities for a range of activities for social gatherings, barbecue, yoga, children's play area, or eating outdoors as well. This space will include overhead elements as well as site furnishings, to create the space. The outdoor terrace area also offers street animation, but maintains both horizontal and vertical separation between public and private realm to delineate between the two. The proposed building establishes a strong presence on the site and is a prominent location on Scott Street, adjacent to Tunney's Pasture and the LRT station. The orientation and form respond to the site constraints, but also its greater context with the suites radiating around a central masonry core. And it was decided that because of the fixed location of the easement, a full street wall again, it was chosen not to pursue a vast expansive garage door. And you can see at the front here is the commercial component that's brought closer to the street and the ability of vehicles to travel under the cantilevered second amenity terrace. The east and west elevations are a series of vertical planes and are separated from the core by balcony reveals and darker glazing to provide half of the suites with views to the north and Gatineau Hills. And the planes are composed of slightly reflective metal to reflect light conditions. Punch windows in the planes are arranged to offer a fluid quality, and the overall approach is to create a series of dynamic planes as opposed to a large static monolithic wall. At grade curvilinear glazing of the commercial area, the residential entry and pedestrian walkway juxtapose the linear elements of the building while complementing landscape design and fluidity of the vertical planes. That is the end of the portion I intended to present, but of course we are very excited to hear comments, questions. As I introduced at the outset, we have basically our whole team here, so we should be able to answer questions on a variety of subjects. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tess. So far, I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but just to take some time so that people can get their questions in, you can put your questions in there. We'll moderate them. Depending, how the questions go, we might invite people to speak directly, but, we'll see how many questions start to roll in. I see Jeff's got his hands up, so if you want to start us off for the Q&A, Jeff.
Yeah, I thought give people a chance to get their questions in. So can you take me through again, how many parking spots are proposed, how many bike parking spots, and what is your minimum parking requirement under the bylaw?
Certainly. I'm going to start with the easy one first. The required parking is the visitor component only.
Okay.
So that is, I believe, off the top of my head, I see Ben has joined us here as well, so he can pipe in if I get it wrong, but it's 0.1 above 12 units for a total of 22 spaces that are required under the zoning bylaw for the visitor component. The commercial does not require any parking, and so the remainder is to be allocated for residential units, and a total of 176 spaces are currently proposed, so of which are 22, so 154 for 230 units.
And how many? And there is no residential parking minimum. The only requirement is for the visitor parking. The how many levels of how many levels below ground of parking do you anticipate? Is that 3?
There are 4. Sorry, I have a number of, if I may share my screen again, additional visuals that I included at the back of the presentation. I didn't need to go through everything, but this provides a cross section. So it's intended to be 4 levels, but they're offset.
Okay. And so I guess one of the places I'm going with that is with 4 levels of underground parking, and well over provisioning residential parking, and not even 1 bike spot per unit, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize. I didn't answer that. So there are currently maybe I misunderstood what you said. There's 122. No. You said not a ratio of 1 to 1. Right.
Right. So we don't even have a bicycle spot per unit on what is going to become some of the best cycling infrastructure once we make the eastbound bus lane a segregated cycling lane in a few years. This is ideally located for cycling, not to mention the access to the Gatineau Hills over the newly opened William Commanda Bridge is going to be a direct connection by cycle over. Very exciting for those who are in Mechanicsville. With all humility I can muster, you need to turn some of that car parking into bicycle parking. There's got to be at least a 1-to-1 ratio, and I would be looking for over provisioning cycling beyond 1-to-1. So I'll leave that as a comment, and I see that there are questions starting to pop in now.
Good. And Jeff, I can confirm also that there is space within some of the storage areas within the building to accommodate that 1-to-1. So that's something we can absolutely look into.
Yeah, I would hope a lot of couples will have 2 bikes. Thank you.
Fantastic, and just in time for a couple of questions coming in. So Cheryl Parrott asks about the plantings, just ornamental grass. We need to have some trees. Looks like you should have enough room in the front. So if anyone would like to maybe speak to the landscape plan, that would be excellent. I'll leave it in your hands.
Guess that'll be me. Tess did a good job of explaining the landscape, but that would be me. So there are 2 trees proposed in the front. So basically replacing the 2 existing trees that are there. Those will also be put in with soil cells so that they actually have an opportunity to grow to maturity. So that's an important part beyond just putting trees in. We want to have success. So we have those, there's 2 trees being put in the front, and then the grasses are really meant to be the spaces in between and sort of delineate some of the elements of the rooms in between the commercial and the residential, and be a bit of a green fingers reaching out from the building to try to draw people in. So it's really meant to be, those are really meant to be those areas that can survive and tolerate those narrow, the constraint conditions we have. Having underground parking means planting material is a little bit harder to work with. So we've gone and developed a plan that'll work well with that type of situation, but then also providing provisions for some trees along the front. And there are some trees along the back as well, where there are opportunities to plant some evergreens and screening, trying to break up some of the spaces and bring down some of the verticality of the building to a pedestrian scale while people will be seeing it and observing it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. Moving on to the next question we have in the chat from Roy Atkinson, who says, congratulations on the off-street loading dock. Much appreciated. The question is, the loading dock does not appear to provide ready access to the commercial space. Is this correct? Without access to the loading dock, what type of commercial use are you anticipating?
I was.
Sorry, Tess.
Oh no, Michael, you go ahead. Go ahead, please.
The site is quite tight, and we did provide a corridor. It would be a fob system corridor, so commercial can bring their garbage to and fro the loading area. So it's not going to be vans stopping on Scott Street, et cetera, et cetera. They will be able to come into the loading area, unload. The loading door is indoors, and then take it through the corridor to the loading dock without passing through the residential lobby. I think, is that clear?
Yeah, if anything, I was wondering, is that something you guys have maybe it would be useful to show right now, if possible? I put it out there.
Yes, I can share my screen again. I
Awesome.
zoomed in on my presentation, so it's a little bit fuzzy, but what Michael was saying is from the loading area here, it's this corridor here that accesses the commercial space. So it's all interior to the building.
Tess, we don't have it up yet.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. How about
now? All good.
To repeat myself, with my screen shared, loading area here, and then the dedicated corridor internal to the building that provides access to the commercial space.
Okay. And that's coming off the ramp going into the building, just to take advantage of it being on the screen.
Yes, so it's a separate entrance. So this is under the cantilevered portion of the building. And so there's a loading area here, and then the ramp down to the underground parking is separate. So this is at grade. And the garbage room is just adjacent to the loading area. So this is also where the garbage collection and staging area would be for pickup.
Got it. That's excellent to know. And to sort of dovetail off that, there's 2 questions asking what the commercial space uses from Roy and also from Laurie Marlowe of the Mechanicsville Community Association. Do you know of your anticipated uses so far? What's happening to the beer store? If anyone could speak to that.
I think to start, certainly the zoning permits a huge range of uses. To my knowledge, there's no committed lease at this point in time, but there are a lot of options. Is there any further information on that from Reed's? No. Okay. So that's just, it's too soon to tell.
Is the beer store in the mix? I have to say most of the questions that I received on social media, especially, go figure, has been with respect to the future of the beer store. It's we're going to feel that loss.
I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, so future of the beer store is uncertain. Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next question we've got from Linda Brown with the Hindenburg Community Association, who asks, has a traffic study been conducted? And given that, consideration, there's another high rise being developed to the immediate south at Holland Cross, and because of street parking along nearby Hamilton, Bowman, and Spencer Streets, it's already difficult for nearby residents. If someone from your team would like to potentially speak to your TIA.
Yes, thank you for the question. So as part of the zoning bylaw amendment application, a transportation impact assessment was conducted for the site. Due to the proximity of the site to the Tunney's Pasture transit station, as well as the extensive active transportation infrastructure within the vicinity of the site. The overall vehicular impacts are expected to be very minimal with respect to both the residential and commercial components. In fact, there may be an overall net decrease in traffic generated by the site with the removal of the existing retail beer store, which is currently configured as a very auto-oriented site for this location.
Awesome. Sorry, I want to give you more space just in case. Was there anything else you want to add? Or
well, I guess I could just add that in terms of the neighborhood traffic infiltration, to help curb that, is proposed to maintain the two existing access driveways where they currently exist today. So there's going to be one onto Scott Street, and then the one through the existing right-of-way shared by the Holland Cross complex to the west. So this will give traffic opportunities to either egress or distribute directly to the arterial road network, or allow for some traffic to go through the residential neighborhood. But given that these access locations are staying the same, and that the overall traffic impacts are expected to be very small, in the order of 15 vehicles for each of the weekday AM and PM peak hours, we anticipate that the sites will have no impact, no noticeable impact relative to existing conditions. Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you, Ben. I'll also put in the transportation impact assessment, since it is live on DevApps, and should anyone watching be interested in locating it, it'll be put in the chat in just a sec, and you can access it on DevApps if you are listening to this and want to find it afterwards. To move on to the next question from Cheryl, who asks, could you please show where the garbage is picked up? And will the garbage truck block that access from Scott? Just to confirm for you, we can see the screen.
Excellent. Thanks, Steph. The garbage loading area and garbage pickup, again, is this loading area that's interior to the site and within the building itself. So the garbage truck, and Ben, again, correct me if I misspeak, but my understanding is it's coming in off of Scott Street, coming in. And I believe these are the truck turning movements that were run to ensure that the truck could navigate and make the turning movement. Is that right, Ben?
Yes, that's correct, Tess. So we conducted swept path analysis, or turning movements, just another name for them, to look at the waste collection vehicle entering the site from either Scott Street or from Bowman Hamilton. And given that this is the largest vehicle that we expect to require access to the site, this was used as a means to design the internal drive aisles and just ensure that the vehicles does not encroach on the site's design.
Thank you, Ben. And perhaps it'll be good to also direct the next question to yourself and Tess. And Cheryl asks as well, is there still public access coming off Scott Street, like under the canopy to get to Bowman?
I'll jump in. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry,
Yes,
sorry, I was just to clarify that question. When you say public access, it's not just, being preserved for trucks or garbage trucks or loading. That yes, it's vehicular access is permitted as well.
Forgive me at the start. I probably should have paid closer attention. That parcel, like underneath the canopy and then off to the property line on the east, that is currently private property, or is it right of way, city right of way?
I'm not sure I'm following which portion you mean of
The road. Is that a public right of way?
Sorry. Oh,
The north
the
south
easement? The easement?
Yeah, the easement. Sure.
No, it's not public. It is an arrangement between the subject property and Holland Cross
Okay.
that provides mutual vehicular pedestrian access primarily, but there's also some underground infrastructure that it deals with as well that we're working with. Yeah.
So it's not a city right of way. It's private
No,
property.
that's correct.
But you have to give you have mutual easements that require each of you to provide access from your respective properties to get egress to either Bowman or to Scott.
That's correct. So
Okay.
the subject property benefits from, let's see, and again, I'm zooming in on something
No, that's great.
almost
That's good.
illegible, but there's this portion here that's adjacent to Bowman that's not part of the subject property that you have to cross to get to the road. And so that's the portion of the easement that the subject property benefits from, is the ability to drive in from Scott Street and have access over the adjacent property to get to the road. Similarly, this property benefits over the subject parcel to get from this loading area to the north out to Scott Street. So that's the mutual easement, but it's just between two private property owners.
So it's not a city right of way, but would you have any intention of controlling property that's not originating or going to the properties involved here from cutting through from Scott to Bowman, or vice versa?
I think that's a good question. It's a little bit more about, site operations and whether or not it's always hard to predict traffic patterns, and it's typically whatever's most convenient for people. But I think the way this is viewed is it would look like you were accessing a private apartment building that I think people would be reluctant, but
I'll give you my own personal routes when I'm on my bike. The very personal view. Politics is local. As cyclists, many of us choose to cut through the beer store parking lot and then out to Bullman in order to get to the market. Pedestrians presumably my wife does the same thing in order to get down Hamilton Avenue to walk to the LRT station. This cuts through the beer store parking lot. As I'm less concerned about it as public vehicular access through the lot, but I wouldn't want it to become so unwelcoming that cyclists and pedestrians cease using it, because it is an important, safe north-south passage compared to Holland and Parkdale arterials, which are obviously a lot busier and pose more of a challenge for some of our active transportation users.
Actually, I think, sorry, yep.
It's Melissa here. I was just going to say, do you want to touch quickly on sort of the long-term solution I believe the city has in place for that access? There is supposed to be a public pathway to the east of this site, like directly on our property line, but not within our property line.
So when Richcraft develops?
The Richcraft development, I believe that is a part of the requirement for that site. So
Okay.
ours would only be considered, I would call it a temporary pathway through until that is developed out.
Okay. So I'll ask maybe Steve and Steph just to get me in the community up, remind us what we approved on the Richcraft property back in whenever that was, 2015, 16.
And actually, that's a question that we have as well. And thank you, Melissa, for pointing that out, because the CDP lays out, just for visual, so everyone knows what we're talking about here, it's this mid-block connection that runs along the eastern property limit that is intended to be, I think it's a 3-meter wide dedicated pedestrian cyclist access point between Scott down to Hamilton. And again, this is envisioned in the CDP. And so this is the subject property. So I fully appreciate your perspective, Jeff, and I think some further thought on the site plan of how people will use this property, not just people in the community, but residents of the property as well, and how they are navigating kind of that north-south as well as going to the north to get to the LRT station. It's also very important to be able to access the south and
Yeah,
all the amenities.
They're going to, exactly. I mean, the Parkdale market is right there, and I'm sure when you're marketing, we're going to see pictures of the Parkdale market in that materials. So
I think what Melissa was saying was certainly the long-term vision is to have a dedicated access on the eastern property limit. It is intended to be on the abutting property to the east, and so yes, we're working with Steve Gauthier to determine, kind of what's in progress, what the future holds for that. But certainly, feedback we got from the UDRP as well is how to address that in the short term, and so that there's options for people and that it's working well.
okay, thanks. Thanks, Cheryl. That's a good nudge.
The mid-block connection is not only shown on the CDP, but it's on the secondary plan also. It's a different schedule. It's shown on the Schedule A.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't take an extract to that.
Okay, but which resemble a lot the CDP. It's almost the same image shown.
Okay. Hopefully I'll be able to pull that up at some point during this while fielding the questions. And maybe just to jump to one question ahead, since it was somewhat on the access question. But Kathy asks, is the ramp for parking coming from Bowman Hamilton corner or Scott Street? Since it does look like both to me, but if you guys can speak to it a bit more, that'd be great.
Trying to find a better image that shows it. I'm not sure I completely understood the question, Steph. Was the question about how you would access the ramp, whether it's from the north or the south?
Yeah, I think probably showing the image kind of makes it a bit obvious now, but it looks like it's right at that Bowman Hamilton corner, but just to
It is,
confirm.
yeah. So it's at the south end of the site, but it could be accessed from Scott Street or from Bowman to the south.
Excellent. And I'll just say, if the resident wants some clarification, I can take that question back and get it. So to jump to the next question, Roland asks, when do you expect the building to be ready for occupancy?
Well, that's always the question to ask when starting the planning approvals process, is that we are just at the beginning of the zoning amendment application. And of course, we're going to be doing a site plan application as well. Certainly the intention is to move through the process, thoroughly, but as quickly as possible. And I think is this a question Reeds might like to answer, or Mike?
I can speak to the construction timeline. We're anticipating about a 2-year process, plus or minus a couple months for the construction timelines.
Yeah, and I think from a development standpoint, it's unknown. We'll be moving with the process as it goes along.
Thank you. I no doubt that the questions are coming in as well with the concerns about the other developments happening on Scott Street at the moment as well. And sort of on that point, Roy asks, the TIA, the Transportation Impact Assessment, the wind study, and the shade studies, all ignore one, the 25-story high-rise immediately south of 1546, two, the inevitable high-rise that will go at the corner of Scott and Parkdale, three, the redevelopment of Tunnings. All this suggests a massive increase in the population and traffic. As a result, existing conditions will change for the worst. Doesn't this negate your argument that there will be no meaningful impact on traffic on the site? If you could maybe speak to how you're anticipating those developments to play with the traffic and maybe some other concerns, I think would be helpful to answer. I'd leave that open.
And if I can start by saying, and then I'll pass it to Ben to speak to the traffic specifically, but when we were preparing the submission for these applications, at the time, the shadow study, the wind study, the traffic study, the recently approved building to the south had not yet been approved. So it was not factored into the studies at that time. In terms of the development direction for the area as a whole, certainly there is further intensification that's anticipated. For the purposes of our application and the data that was used, we are basing it on existing conditions now. Ben, did you want to speak to the traffic?
Yes, absolutely. So just to provide a little bit of clarification regarding the transportation impact assessment, the traffic volumes that were referenced in that study were obtained from the City of Ottawa's Scott Street Functional Design Team, which had developed traffic projections through to 2031, accounting for most of the significant developments that were expected to occur in the study area, including 1560 Scott Street, the development on the portion of Holland Cross immediately to the west, as well as the site at 274 Parkdale, the south, so that's at the southwest corner of Parkdale and Scott Street. So yeah, those development applications were considered, and consistent with the Scott Street study for the intersection of Bowman and Parkdale, which was outside of those study limits. We carried forward the same underlying assumption and applied a 1% growth rate to account for regional growth at that location. Hopefully that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And if there's any follow-up, I invite the resident to send their follow-up question in the Q&A as well, and I'll direct that to you. So to echo some previous comments, Cheryl also says the number of parking spaces provided is really high with 0.67 spots per unit for a building that is also right across from an LRT station. And she says, please decrease the number of residential spaces and provide at least a 1.5 to 1 ratio for bike parking. So more of to put the comment out there. And Linda Brown also echoes a comment on the pedestrian bicycle access on the site. And to jump to the next question from Cheryl, who says, I see the air intake seems to be on the east side of the easement and right beside the neighboring property. How noisy will this be? Will hot air come out of the intake, or will it only take air in? What are the impacts on the adjacent property? I put the question to whoever might be best to answer on your team.
I can answer. It's intake only, so it's not exceptionally noisy. If from this discussion, should the parking area be reduced, the area being served is reduced, so it even becomes smaller. But generally, intakes are not noisy, nor are exhausts. There's mufflers and all sorts of louvers and dampers. They're not noisy though.
Okay, thank you. And if there's any follow-up to that, of course, we can pass that on as well. So to go to the next question from Roy, who says, the new official plan, it reinforces the importance of urban trees. The tree study for your proposed development indicates 14 of 23 trees will be removed, with only 2 new trees being added. Typically, a multiple of new trees have to be planted for each tree removed, or cash in lieu payment is made. Is there any reason that trees could not be grown along the east border of the property?
So I'll take that. Thanks for the question. So yeah, 2 new urban trees along Scott Street. There are additional 5, evergreen trees that would be, on the south side of the property. The east property will have trees. There'll be cedar trees. I hate to call them trees because they really aren't contributing to the urban canopy the same as some of the other ones, but there will be a buffer along there to try to plant on that edge. The challenge being that with a taller building and with proposed development in the future, there's a little uncertainty as to what that may be, and trying to fit trees, and we want to have success with them growing and not impacting the building and actually not causing harm to the trees long term as well. So we did look at the east side, but based on the configuration and the way things are with being such a tight site, it was challenging to fit more street trees and urban trees in. So we really sort of tried to maximize where possible, fully respecting the fact that we know we are removing additional trees, as compared to what was there. That said, though, we are doing our best to try to return those back. And as we go through iterations on this, we'll be looking at, maintaining or increasing the numbers that we have in there.
Awesome. Thank you very much for elaborating on that. And to go to the next question from Cheryl, who asks, you said there would be metal cladding on the east and west sides. Please ensure that the cladding does not reflect bright sunlight for drivers on Scott and for neighbors. I don't know if you can speak maybe to the sort of materiality for the building, but if that's something someone can speak to, I put it to them.
I can speak to it. It's not like a mirror. It doesn't reflect at the same way. A white metal cladding can reflect up to 85 to 90%, which is, I think, the glare that you're speaking of. This metal in this family, you're at about 34%. So it's not like bright, shiny copper or a white metal. It it morphs with the color of the atmospheric condition, the weather, but it's not reflecting direct sunlight. And there's a bit of a grain to it and a texture to it, and that also takes away glare. So I don't think you're going to be in the morning, if you're driving west on Scott, you're going to have an issue. And it's sort of the same would be in the evening if you're driving east on Scott.
Perfect. Thank you. I know there's been some similar questions for other developments on Scott Street, so I have no doubt that these questions might be coming from a place of concern, sort of in that realm as well. To go to the next question and comment that we have. So Cheryl says there's a lot of asphalt in the easement and parking spots. Please ensure that this asphalt is as permeable as possible. Please exceed city requirements. So I put this as a comment to your team to take into consideration. And to jump to the next question from Linda, who asks, can you refresh my memory? Will there be any larger 3-bedroom units?
Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the unit mix at this point in time is 1 and 2 bedroom units. But
That's
again,
how that's how it stands today, but on a 6-meter grid and 3-meter intervals, it's very easy to make changes to accommodate virtually any suite size.
I'll just say there was, again, good discussion of that related to the Theberge development on Rideau today at Planning Committee. And, Planning Committee is getting more and more interested in seeing those larger bedroom units, even in advance of the adoption of the new official plan, which obviously has a key emphasis on that. And I know just in my discussions in Hintonburg over the years, we're very, very interested in seeing 3-bedroom units. And we think builders, they have an obligation to provide some of those in areas like this, which, are such amenity-rich areas. We want people to be able to enjoy smaller scale urban living with families in them. So just a comment there again for you.
Fantastic. And I'll jump to the next question we have from Roy, who says that nice to see that TIA was based on a city forecast of future growth in density and multiple high rises. There's a risk of wind tunnel effects and walls of shade being cast on the neighborhood. Were the wind and shade studies also based on forecasts of the neighboring high-rise buildings?
I will ask Michael on the shadow study in a moment, but the orientation of the site is that the shadow is being cast to the north and the east and the west, not the community to the south. But in terms of whether future potential buildings were included, no, they were not. Again, the shadow study is based on existing conditions of the context, in addition to what's being proposed, and that's the exercise for the shadow study. Similarly, the wind study is intended to mimic the existing conditions and then determine whether what's being proposed will have a negative impact on that. So again, the building to the south at the time these studies were prepared had not been approved, so they are not showing that. But again, the shadow, the impact actually is really on the subject site for the building to the south, not the subject part, not the other way around.
Got it. Thank you very much, Tess. And to jump to the next question from Lori of the Mechanicsville Community Association, who comments that you may want to rethink no windows on the east-west side. You're missing incredible views, sunrise, Parliament, sunsets, etc. And actually with that, we're currently out of questions to ask. So I'm not sure if there's any matters, Jeff, maybe you would like to help raise. There you go.
I know there's usually some last minute questions, so I'll fill in the meantime. I've also seen some discussion, I think, in the online forums about the retail space on Scott. I don't have a good understanding of what sort of visibility that's going to have to the street. Can you just take us through like how that functions as a retail space? Like, where's the front door and the sign?
Michael, did you want to
Yeah, if
provide? I don't know what plan is best to show, but this one shows the door.
That works right there. You can see the front doors, and they may be a little more centered on the walkway. It may be pushed further towards Scott Street as well, so it'll have a little more interface with the street edge. So it's just, we call it a pavilion, I guess would be a better word for it. It's a whole sort of object at the front of the building right on Scott Street.
Is its attractiveness going to be kind of limited to food and beverage, restaurant, bar?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No,
It's a very small, there's a long gap to the existing 7-story. And then there's another big gap to the Richcraft development. And I've seen some skepticism that you're going to be able to attract really a lot of foot traffic, for example, to it.
I think the foot traffic is going to be generated by to and fro from the LRT. I think that's going to be your foot traffic.
I'll be curious to see how that evolves. Would it have the ability to have patio space if it were a restaurant or food or beverage?
I think so. We have sort of, I call it a courtyard, but we have all that landscaped area that could definitely accommodate outdoor dining, as I would call it, which is, we know it's definitely 3 seasons now with COVID. I'm willing to sit outside in some pretty cold temperatures.
Yeah, there's when everything reopens, there's going to be some liberal use made of the blowers for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I know I've seen some curiosity and some skepticism out there, just given it's kind of isolated as to what sort of retail or commercial might work in there. Is there the potential that it would become an office? It's a mixed use, so is it commercial zoning for that, or is it broader than just commercial?
I think Tess or Reeds would be able to reply to that specifically.
My understanding is the mixed use zone does permit a range of commercial and retail opportunities as well as offices. I'd have to double check that, but I think it's always hard to understand exactly what lease will end up in a space when we're envisioning it, but there are a number of opportunities there. And I think, as Michael said, there's enough flexibility that it could be a welcoming space for many different uses.
Okay. Steve, could I just ask you to weigh in quickly as to the with the proposed zoning, whether that would encompass office and commercial?
Oh, I think you're muted, Steve. You're
So I'll get my face out of my camera. I'm looking at the right there.
And sorry, I'd pull it up, but I have too many screens going, and I don't want to mess around here.
Sorry, I'll give Steve a moment because he looks like he's working on
And
it.
yeah, if the tech is proving a barrier, Steve, don't worry about it. We'll catch up on that.
And for proposed retail uses as well, I'm not sure if we noted it in a question before, but someone did mention that a grocery store or a similar use would be a welcome addition in the neighborhood. And Roy has also said that it might make for a nice healthcare center or dental office or daycare as some other uses maybe to contemplate for those future questions.
It's funky. I like that. I like that front bulb.
The zoning is MC12.
Oh, okay.
Subzone 12. So the following use are prohibited. I guess the subzone prohibits amusement center, bar, nightclub, parking garage, parking lot, shelter, sports arena, townhouse. But if I go to the parent MC, just a moment. There's quite a long list. So the question was offices or
yeah, offices.
Office is permitted as a main use.
Perfect.
The same as a bank would be permitted. The same as yeah. There's quite a long list. Retail store, restaurants. So it's a very long list. You've got almost everything there.
Yeah. Could you imagine getting a bank in there? There's a bunch of amenities that are very much needed by especially the residents on Mechanicsville, for whom the hike to Wellington Street is a long hike, and with Tunney's pasture going in, the opportunity to serve those folks in the future. Okay. Lori says, please, not another weed shop or coffee shop. I don't know, Lori. I think we probably need more weed shops. That's what Kitchissippi needs. More weed stores. How many we got now? 7, 8, and coffee shops. I think I counted. So I'm on Hamilton Avenue, just to the south of your site here, on the other side of Wellington. I think I counted 25 places where I could go for a coffee within 400 meters walk. It was wild. Lori's absolutely right. Hopefully we don't get another coffee shop or a weed store. So with that, why don't we wrap it up? There's no more questions in the queue. So you have applied for this. It's an active application right now. The community should be getting its comments into Steve, who at some point in the next few months will be writing a report that recommends approval or not to the planning committee. Steve, have you already provided sort of a first round of comments back to the applicant?
Yes, there's a first round of comments for the circulation period that ended earlier in January. But I would ask for those who attended this information session to try as much as possible to provide me with comments within the next week. I would then consolidate them and send them to the applicant. So this is just a rezoning. It was circulated separate from the site plan, so the site plan will follow. The site plan circulation will follow, and probably in a few weeks. But this item, so I'm going to be awaiting a resubmission with changes to the proposal. As Tess indicated, it went to UDRP. Comments were provided by planning, so we're awaiting a resubmission. Should the resubmission be satisfying and received in the next few weeks, this item could go to planning committee in April.
Wow.
Yeah, but
fast.
That would be fast. If, like I said, if I'd be receiving a resubmission in the next couple of weeks, if not, it would be probably end of spring, beginning of summer.
Okay. No, and again, obviously the greatest discomfort I've heard from the community has been with respect to the height of the building. But I've been at pains to show people the secondary plan anticipates this kind of height, so that's not really a discussion that is going to influence the process in this one. So really, it's kind of some of those details. And I know Steph has probably captured a number of your comments. Please send those in to me as well. Do get Steve a copy of your comments. It sounds like he's moving fast, and we'll go from there. So I just want to say, Tess, and to your team, thank you very much for showing us the proposal. And with that, I will wish you all a very good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye
you very
now.
much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice night.
Thank you. Thanks.